WVUA-FM, Tuscaloosa.
All right, what is up, Tuscaloosa, and welcome to the student section on this fine Halloween evening. We want to wish all of our listeners a happy Halloween. It's great trick-or-treating weather tonight, so if you're going out trick-or-treating tonight, or if you're at a party, we hope that you have a great time. Maybe dress up a cool costume, get some nice candy, and just be sure to be safe out there this evening. Don't want to get caught by anything spooky. Got a lot of interesting stuff to talk about. Obviously, the Alabama Crimson Tide was on their bye week this week, so nothing to talk about for Alabama this week in terms of college football. But coming up in the next couple minutes here, the Cincinnati Bengals will take on the Cleveland Browns in Cleveland, Ohio. The Bengals are a 3-point favorite right now to win this matchup. Important thing to know, though, they do not have Ja'Marr Chase. Ja'Marr Chase has suffered an injury recently, and he will be out for the next 4 to 6 weeks. So no Ja'Marr Chase in this game. I'm just going to jump right into this predictions here. Cleveland, they're 2-5 right now. This is kind of a must-win game for them if they want to stay relevant in this race to potentially win their division. This is a divisional game for the Cleveland Browns and Cincinnati Bengals in the AFC. Without Ja'Marr Chase, and you've got the Cleveland Browns backed into a corner here, they have to win this game. I'm going to do this hesitantly, Ronnell, but I'm going to take Cleveland to win outright. And I know that's a risky move here to make. Obviously, Cincinnati, this past couple of games have been doing really well, but I think without Ja'Marr Chase, now you're down to T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd. You got some good options there in the receiving core. Joe Mixon, obviously, in the backfield, but I just think that because the Cleveland Browns are in this situation where they have to win to stay relevant in the conference, in their division. And by the way, this is a division that could be got, right? Baltimore's defense has looked leaky all season long. They've given up big leads to lots of different teams. Their offense has not been overly impressive. Cincinnati's gotten off to a really slow start to the season. Now they begin to warm up these past few games. And Pittsburgh looks pretty bad on offense. I mean, there's not much good going on right now. Offensive line's not great. The run game, because of the offensive line play, isn't great either. Kenny Pickett, a rookie quarterback, things just are not working out right now for Pittsburgh offensively. So this is kind of an open conference, and I think that Cleveland, if they want to hold on to hopes that by the time they get Deshaun Watson back later on in the season, they could potentially still be in the conversation to win this division, they have to win tonight.
I agree. I agree so much, Aidan. The Cleveland Browns are backed in a corner, like you said, and this is really a big opportunity to get back into the division race. And also, Deshaun Watson's not too far off from return. I think he was spending 11 games. I'm pretty sure 11 games. It's week 8, so it's only 3 more weeks. They go 2-1 these 3 weeks, or even undefeated, then you're right back in the talk of things and the swing of things. So, as far as prediction goes, I don't think it's going to matter. I think with Njoku being out, they're already down Brissett, who's not a bad option at the quarterback position. I just don't see them keeping up with Cincinnati, whose offense has been on a roll. I know they lost Ja'Marr Chase, but they still have Joe Burrow. They still have T. Higgins. They still have Boyd. They still have a good offense, even without Ja'Marr, and a good running game. So, score-wise, I think the Bengals are going to win, I'll say 27-19 or 27-20. I think it's going to be a close game. It's going to be a hard-fought game, but I feel like when it matters most, deeper into the game, I feel like it's going to come down to passing. They're both going to have to pass the ball, and I just trust the Bengals offense more than I trust Brissett in the crunch time when he can't just run the ball. They can't run the ball to take over the game.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if this Cleveland Browns secondary can control and contain the passing attack of the Bengals, because if they can, I like Cleveland's run game a lot more than Cincinnati's run game right now. Cincinnati's offensive line was retooled this offseason, and quite frankly, it hasn't been any better, in my opinion, from what I've seen than last season. It's beginning to cook a little bit, but we'll have to continue to watch them. Some big news that just came out, I don't know, maybe within the past 2 hours. Roquan Smith, the league's leading tackler, has been traded from Chicago to the Baltimore Ravens. We just finished talking about the Ravens, a leaky defense. Their secondary hasn't been great. What do? They go out and get one of the best linebackers in the country in Roquan Smith. I think it's going to greatly improve this Baltimore Ravens defense. And if you're Baltimore, you're sitting here looking at your division. Cincinnati is getting off to a slow start. Cleveland has to play with their backup quarterback until Deshaun Watson gets back after his suspension. Pittsburgh has not looked good at all offensively. So you're thinking to yourself, if you're Baltimore, we can win this division. So I think this was a move that they made because they felt like they could win. How much of an impact do you think it will make?
I agree. I think that they made this move to win. Baltimore hasn't looked as dominant as I thought they would coming into it, and that's why, like we said earlier, the division, the AFC North is still so open. But they needed this jolt. Their defensive line is a little shaky. They don't have not even the right guys, but they don't have guys that have been making impacts. They have good quality guys out there. Calais Campbell's been hurt. Houston is good. I'm pretty sure they got him from the Chiefs. JPP hasn't been like that kind of guy for a very long time. So they needed something like this to really kickstart their offense. They have a decent secondary. They have Marlon Humphrey. They have Marcus Peters back there. And Jalen Armour-Davis. But they just need to, I feel like, get their front seven going, get their front seven working, and they can still win this division 100%.
Yeah, I agree with you. It is an interesting thing to see. Obviously, the trade deadline is coming up really, really soon. I think maybe tomorrow. But they are trading a second-round pick and a fifth-round pick for this deal. So 2 picks. So Chicago has got now 9 total for the 2023 draft. So, we saw Chicago trade away Robert Quinn, right? Who is an older guy, maybe kind of in the edge of his prime, right? And you're looking at Chicago, it's a rebuild. You have to start bringing in some young players. But I felt like Roquan Smith was one of those foundational pieces that you could continue to build your young team around. And I guess Chicago felt differently. They trade him away to, the Baltimore Ravens. It felt different to me. Robert Quinn one, I understood. He's an older guy, kind of expensive. You trade him away to the Eagles. They're in the NFC. You're in the AFC. So, it's different. But this is one of their young star players who has been absolutely tremendous at his position, and they trade him away for a second and a fifth. So I'm a little shocked at this trade, to be honest with you. And I kind of wonder how tensions were in the locker room there, because I do believe Roquan Smith kind of held out of training camp this offseason, so who knows what's going on there, but it's an interesting thing to follow.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure, didn't he was, when they traded Robert Quinn, I saw a video on Twitter not too long after of him crying during the press conferences when he found out, so there's a lot of tension going on with him and the team, so he should, I feel like this was probably best for both sides situation. He goes to a better team. they don't have to deal with that type of drama on a bad team. They need to just focus on changing their culture.
Yeah, I believe he actually requested a trade at the very beginning of this season. They said, no, we're not trading you. Well, now they are. So who knows? Perhaps that the way that the news was broke to him, because it kind of felt like he didn't know until that press conference and somebody asked him, and it just so happened to be in front of all those cameras and all the press that he had that response and that emotional response. So perhaps there is some ill will with the way that they handled that trade as well. All right, elsewhere in the NFL, Tom Brady took a loss to the very same Ravens on Thursday Night Football. And it has been announced officially by both Tom Brady and his now ex-wife Giselle that he and Giselle are getting a divorce. Tom Brady came back to football. He has not looked the same. The offensive line has been depleted by injury. Tom Brady now leads all quarterbacks all time by taking the most sacks. He's taken 555 sacks in his career. He is 45 years old, I think.
Yeah.
And now he is going through a divorce. Is it fair to say he made a mistake coming back?
I mean, we'll truly not know that until January, if they're in the playoffs or not, because, it's playoff Tom Brady is a different man. So I will say that. But I think he should never come back into the league, especially if you're going to retire. You're great like that. That's one of the things that made Michael Jordan so great. He had so much success and he retired early. And he made sure to retire early. The only time he tried to come back was for a stake in a team so he could, get ownership, which he ended up being successful at. Tom Brady is trying to, he's stuck in the I need to win, 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 win. He needs to focus on other things, and I wouldn't say it's a mistake because they could still figure it out because their division is not very good. James is still out. The Panthers, we saw them do what they did. The Falcons aren't bad. They're a very solid team. But I think the Bucs are still easily the best team in that division, and they have the better pieces of all the teams. So they need to figure something out. Tom needs to figure something out regarding his personal life because I'm happy they figured out this divorce situation because that being in the public like this during the season has, I think, shown a great impact on the field, and it's been bad. It's been really bad.
Tom Brady has definitely been distracted, flying off and going to Robert Kraft, the owner of the New England Patriots wedding, not flying back when he could have and met with the team on that Thursday and flown with them to the game. He had to fly straight from New England to a game because he decided to stay. Going through a divorce. He left retirement to come back to a team, and all he's doing is getting sacked right now, and they're not even in the division, and he lost, and he's got a divorce because of this, I'm not saying that had he retired and been retired that this divorce would not have occurred, but it does seem like, at least from what I've gotten from Giselle, she wanted him to stay retired and focus more on the family. And he felt like another ring was, worth the risk with his family and his wife. Yeah. I don't know if that's going to happen.
He has nothing to prove.
Yeah, exactly. He's got nothing to prove. Go home, retire, focus on your TB12 and, company that you have. You're the greatest of all time, unquestionable. You don't have to come back. And you look at this team. They have good pieces, like you mentioned, but they're old. They're old pieces. To Julio Jones, one of the best receivers all time, top 15 receiver, maybe top 10 receiver all time. He is at the very, very end of his career, certainly out of his prime. He's in his mid to late 30s now. Tom Brady just looks old at this point. I think Father Time has finally caught up with him. Mm-hmm. So we shall see. I think also Todd Bowles, the head coach now of Tampa, has been a little lenient with Tom because of all of the accolades and how much he's earned it. But at some point, you have to play with your guys at practice. You have to show up to training camp. You can't take all these sabbaticals that you've been taking because that does affect your chemistry with the team. Mm-hmm. The Eagles are flying high right now. They are the only undefeated team still in the NFL. They took down Pittsburgh 35-13. Jalen Hurts I think he has proven all kinds of doubters wrong. There was a lot of people who questioned, can he throw the football? Well, he went 19-28 for 285 yards and 4 touchdowns. He also ran the ball only twice for 10 yards. So most of his, if not all of his, offensive production in this game came from inside the pocket or scrambling and making throws. A.J. Brown had a phenomenal day, 6 catches for 156 yards, 3 touchdowns. This Philadelphia team is great passing the football. They're great running the football. They are taking away the ball at a pretty high rate. Darius Slay and Bradbury. I think this could be a Super Bowl contending team, which is crazy to think about. Jalen Hurts is only in his 2nd year as a full-time starter, 3rd year in the NFL. Nick Sirianni is in his 2nd year as a head coach, I believe. But this team looks great. They look fantastic. They're 7-0. They are ahead of the Dallas Cowboys. They're ahead of the 6-2 Giants. So they're in a very good division. They're in a pretty deep division. And they're still ahead. Let's just assume Philadelphia goes 5-5. They go 500 for the rest of the season. They're got 12 wins on the season. If they go, 500 for the rest of the year. And when you look at their schedule that's coming up, they play the Texans, the Commanders, the Colts. That's probably 3 wins right there. Then you have the Packers, the Titans, the Giants, the Bears, the Cowboys, the Saints, the Giants again. So I very much see 5 wins here. I think there could be more. But yeah, this team right here, the Philadelphia Eagles, they are currently in that first place spot in the NFC with that week 1 bye for the playoffs. I honestly don't see that changing. I don't know about you, Ronnell, but
the Eagles look ridiculous right now. They're looking very excellent. And now that if they're throwing the ball at this rate, then they're practically unstoppable. Now I do want to see more consistency in that matter against a team that's not as depleted and bad. But the fact that they're doing that is just showing it's great to see Jalen Hurts making those strides, improving in the pocket and improving throwing the ball. He's rushing well. Like you said, I don't see them losing 5 games. And the only teams I see them losing to are against the NFC East teams, just because of their rivalry games. But I don't see anyone else challenging them. Now the Vikings are 6-1, so but they have a win over the Vikings. So unless they lose 2 games, and the Vikings win out or something like that, they're probably gonna end up with home field advantage. We got to see how things shake out. I will say I think their worst nightmare at this point is gonna be having to play a Giants or a Cowboys team in the playoffs, just because they're rivals, just because they know each other so well, and those games are always tight, and it's like a flip of a coin. So that's the only adversity I can see them meeting at this point in the season, unless something something bad happens. But as of now, that's how it is.
All right, we got tons more to talk about. Lots of moving and shaking happening in college football right now. So be sure to stick around when we return on the student section.
WVUA-FM, Tuscaloosa.
All right, and welcome back to the student section. I'm Aidan Magouyrk, joined by Ronnell, Foreman. We're talking a little NFL football. We left off talking about the undefeated Eagles. There's somebody else who's undefeated. It's not a team, it's a player. Tua Tagovailoa is undefeated during his time as a starter this season. Now, the Dolphins do have 3 losses, but all of those 3 losses came when Tua did not play the entire game. They took down the Detroit Lions 31-27. Tua looked really good in this game. 29 of 36 for 382 yards and 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. He leads the league right now in QBR and passer rating. So, doing great things, former Alabama quarterback. It's so good to see Tua having some success. Jalen Waddle also had a great day, 8 catches for 106 yards and 2 touchdowns. I gotta say, this combo of Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, we all knew it was going to be good. They're 2 of the fastest, if not the 2 fastest receivers in the NFL. It may have exceeded my expectations for what they could be right now. They are a fantastic duo, and they are doing some great things right now for the Dolphins. Let's see here. The 49ers, Christian McCaffrey, my goodness.
Yeah.
I mean, the dude, for those of you who did not watch this game yesterday, Christian McCaffrey obviously got traded to the 49ers from the Carolina Panthers, and he has been tremendous thus far. Only played in 2 games, but yesterday he helped the San Francisco 49ers take down the Rams 31-14. Kyle Shanahan just cannot lose to Sean McVay in the regular season. I think he's 8-0 versus Sean McVay in the regular season right now. Christian McCaffrey, it's hilarious because when you look at this, you'll see Jimmy Garoppolo's stats, and then right under him is Christian McCaffrey. Christian McCaffrey threw for a touchdown to Brandon Ayuk. He ran for a touchdown, and he caught a touchdown. So he is the first player since LaDainian Tomlinson in 2005, I believe, to run, catch, and throw a touchdown. So he had a tremendous day. Kyle Shanahan using him in every single way that he possibly can. And here's a scary thing. If you're also in the NFC and you're looking at the 49ers, they did not have Deebo Samuel in this game. Yeah, and they still beat the defending Super Bowl champions 31-14. So when they get all of their players back, they also didn't have their fullback Kyle Juszczyk either. This San Francisco team is scary good.
They are.
Now with Christian McCaffrey. So it'll be exciting to watch them. The Bills looked like the best team in the NFL. They crushed Green Bay. Green Bay fought back. They battled back. They beat them. They lost 27-17 though. Buffalo, I mean, they are just a phenomenal team right now. They're my pick to win the Super Bowl. We'll see if that changes. Kansas City is fantastic, and they always have a bit of trouble with them. All right. Bama's on a bye, getting ready to play LSU this Saturday in Death Valley in the evening. So hopefully our players can get healthy. Today is also Nick Saban's birthday, so we want to take a moment here from the student section to wish Nick Saban a happy birthday on this fine Halloween. Elsewhere in Alabama, though, some pretty big news. We're going to get to that in a little bit because I think that this may take a little while. So I want to get through some of the things first here. TCU remains undefeated after they took down West Virginia. It was kind of a close game, if I'm being honest. I thought TCU might win this game a little bit better. It's 41-31. There were several times where I felt like West Virginia was going to come back. Ultimately, it didn't.
It's just the Big 12 for you.
Big 12 is crazy right now.
They don't play defense, but the TCU Horned Frogs are a really good team. They just don't play defense out in the Big 12. I don't know. I think TCU is a good team. They're a solid squad. I'm interested to see them against higher competition, but also I think the committee is looking at them as their private institution. Like, they have to be perfect in the regular season. They have to win their conference championship in order to get in. So
yeah.
Time will tell.
So you kind of give us a little preview here. For those of you who do not know, tomorrow, unfortunately, it has to be tomorrow, the day after we do our show.
Yeah.
But tomorrow, the College Football Playoff Committee releases their first playoff rankings. Now, these mean absolute diddly squat because obviously there's going to be so much turnover in the top 4 from now until the time where we actually see who gets to go to the playoffs, but it's nice to know where you stand. Tennessee and Georgia will both be in the top 4, I suspect. Those two play each other this weekend. One of them will lose. Ohio State and Michigan, probably both of them in the top 4.
Yeah.
Those teams both have to play each other at the end of the season. One of them will lose to the other. So it's very possible that we could see 2 of the top 4 teams that we have right now both fall out of the top 4 when it comes time to the end of the season. And we'll get into some of that a little bit later in the show. Elsewhere in the Big 12, though, like you mentioned, it's just crazy. Kansas State absolutely destroyed Oklahoma State. Number 9, Oklahoma State. 48-0. Shut out Oklahoma State. This is one of the worst losses, I think, under the Mike Gundy era here for Oklahoma State. And if you caught, Mike Gundy's press conference, he said something a little interesting. He said, I changed something up in practice that I've never done before, and I think that hurt us. And when he was pressed about it, he said something about being concerned about depth, and he changed the way that they practice because of his issues about depth. And he didn't flat out say it, but there are some people that I trust that speculate that he probably held some of his healthy starters out and played some backups just to kind of work that depth, and that hurt them going into this game where they got completely embarrassed by Kansas State and their backup quarterback. Their starting quarterback for Kansas State did not play in this game. Their backup quarterback, Will Howard, did, and he played phenomenal. 21 of 37 for 296 yards and 4 touchdowns. Deuce Vaughn ran for 158 touchdowns, not touchdowns. He ran for 1 touchdown, 158 yards. It was just really bad for Kansas State Cowboys. I think they're currently sitting at the number 3 odds right now to win the Big 12 championship, so they could still win the Big 12 championship. Kansas State sitting at number 2, and obviously undefeated TCU Horned Frogs sitting at the number 1 spot, currently the favorites to win the Big 12 championship. TCU is the only team in the Big 12 left that could potentially make it to the playoffs. They would have to probably play a perfect season and win the Big 12 championship to do so. It'll be interesting when we see the rankings come out tomorrow, what the committee values, right? If you see TCU ahead of Alabama, it's clear that they value wins and losses a little more than strength of schedule, a little more than just the quality of the team. But if you see Alabama ahead of TCU or ahead of Clemson even, then obviously the strength of record counts, and obviously the strength of schedule counts a lot more than just wins and losses. I predict that it will be closer to the latter. I think Alabama and Clemson are likely going to be ahead of TCU in these first rankings that we see tomorrow, just because despite TCU being undefeated, I just do not see them playing Alabama right now and winning.
It's just precedent, too. They haven't been good for a few years, and now they just kind of come out of nowhere. And no hate on them. They've had a great campaign, but they have to be perfect, and they have to just keep doing this and remain consistent if they want to have a chance to make it in. 4 teams. Yeah.
And they can. If they go undefeated and they win the Big 12 championship, they will likely get in.
Yeah.
Unless there's a bunch of chaos everywhere else, it's more than likely going to come down to them being undefeated and winning the Big 12 championship, which I don't necessarily think is out of the realm of possibility for TCU. We're just going to check here the rest of their schedule to see who they have to play. This is a gauntlet that they're going to have to play coming up. They play Texas Tech. That'll be a tough out. They play at Texas, which will be really difficult. At Baylor, another difficult matchup, and then Iowa State. Quite frankly, I don't see them going 4-0 in this stretch. I think they're probably going to take a loss. And when you see that, they're going to be out of the playoffs, and that would put the Big 12 out of the college football playoff as an entire conference. Hopping over to the SEC, what has usually been called the biggest cocktail party of October, Florida versus Georgia rivalry. It didn't look much like a rivalry at all. Florida lost to Georgia 42-20. At one point, I think the Gators did battle back, got it down to like 21-20, something like that. But ultimately, they just could not hold up against this Georgia team. Stinson Bennett threw for over 300 yards. Georgia ran for over 230 yards. They had about a 6 yards per carry average. If you're averaging 6 yards per carry and you're Georgia, you're winning the game. I mean, conversely, Florida ran the ball for 100 yards and 2.9 yards per carry. So it was just not nearly good enough from the Florida Gators. And Florida got 2 interceptions off of Georgia. They got a fumble off of Georgia, so Georgia turned the ball over 3 times.
They're playing sloppy.
Still ended up beating them 42-20.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that says more about how good Georgia is, or if that says more about how not good Florida is right now. The fact that Georgia turns the ball over 3 times and still wins by 22 points.
Yeah, I don't think that says much about Georgia more than that just says that Florida is just not designed to make better plays off those turnovers. I think that Georgia, if they're going to turn the ball over like that, they're going to have a lot of trouble against this Tennessee team. They can't turn the ball over 3 times and think that they're going to win that game. I don't care if it's in Athens and Knoxville, doesn't really matter. Stetson Bennett's going to also have to play like that, just like how he played last game. I mean, clean football, but he's going to have to play clean football, obviously. But he's going to have to throw over 300 yards. I have a feeling that Tennessee's going to come out, and it's going to be a shootout. And I think Georgia's defense could come back in the game, and they could start stalling the Tennessee offense out. But I don't know if it's going to happen the first or the second quarter. It might be a halftime adjustments kind of thing. I don't know. Tennessee's really good. I don't know if Georgia has a good chance of losing this game. They could win it too, but it's not, I think 2-3 weeks ago it was like 65-35, and now it's closer to like 51-49. Like it's close. Close.
This Tennessee team is very good offensively, not so great defensively, especially in the secondary. They are 40th in yards per play on defense, so they're not a fantastic team. Georgia right now, minus 8.5, according to ESPN's Pick Center. They have a 74.9% chance to win, according to the matchup predictor. I'm going to be honest with you, Georgia's defense is better than Alabama's defense, probably, I think. And I trust Kirby Smart as a defensive mind and Will Muschamp as a defensive coordinator a little more than I trust Pete Golding and Nick Saban at this point. We've just seen enough from the Pete Golding era, and we've seen enough from Kirby to know Kirby is schematically a better coach when it comes to defense. So we'll see how that works out. I don't know. It could end up being a shootout. It could not end up being a shootout. We'll have to see. The most important thing for Georgia is stop Tennessee early and don't let them get off to a fast start, which is something that they've done a lot. All right, be sure to stick around. We have some pretty interesting news in the world of college football and SEC when we return on the student section.
WVUA-FM, Tuscaloosa.
All right, welcome back to the student section. Aidan Magouyrk, joined by Ronnell. Foreman. Left off talking about a little college football. Out on the West Coast, Oregon continues to look pretty impressive. They took down Cal 42-24. Now, this is a place where they historically have had a few slip-ups, but they look pretty good. Bo Nix, 27-35 for 412 yards, 3 touchdowns. He did throw 2 picks. So, Bo Nix kind of being Bo Nix, as we all know down here in the South, likes to throw the ball to the other team every now and then. He did run the ball, 12 carries for 59 yards and 3 touchdowns. So Bo Nix accounted for 6 touchdowns himself. That's pretty good. That is pretty good. I think Oregon right now, they were ranked number 8 this past weekend. We're going to see where they are in the AP. I think they could probably beat Clemson right now. I'm not sold on Clemson as a top 5 team in the country. Mm-hmm. I like Oregon a lot. I think Oregon's probably going to win the Pac-12 championship. The only team I think Oregon might have some issues with is USC. And the fun thing is, they don't play USC in the regular season. They would only play USC if both teams were selected for the Pac-12 championship. Now, the Pac-12 does not have divisions. They only take the 2 top teams to play in their championship game. So we could potentially see USC and Oregon in the Pac-12 championship game. Oregon plays Colorado, Washington, Utah, and Utah State. So they do end the season with 3 kind of difficult matchups, Utah and Oregon State especially. But ever since that Georgia loss, Oregon has done nothing but get better.
Yeah.
And I think that is a great testament to the coaching job that first-year head coach Dan Lanning is doing right now. So very excited for the Oregon Ducks. And if they continue to win the Pac-12 championship game, you might see Oregon potentially, depending on the way the rest of the country plays out, potentially end up in the college football playoffs. If you have, for example, a 1-loss Georgia that is not a conference champion, or a 1-loss Tennessee that is not a conference champion, and a 1-loss Michigan or a 1-loss Ohio State that are not conference champions, but you have a 1-loss Oregon that is a conference champion, I think Oregon would probably really be pushed into that conversation for a playoff spot. Tennessee cruised past Kentucky 44-6. I'm not really sure how good Kentucky is, to be honest with you. They're not built the way that you have to be built to beat Tennessee. You have to score offense. You have to be able to utilize the passing game. And Will Levis threw for 98 yards.
Yeah.
It's just not a great performance. This is not a good pass defense, and they could not capitalize. They only ran for 100 yards on the ground as well. Tennessee has a pretty solid rush defense, and they do create pressure in the pocket. But, I mean, they scored 1 touchdown, a rushing touchdown, Chris Rodriguez. They miss the point after. And pretty much after that, it just went downhill for Tennessee. Kentucky could not stop Tennessee. Tennessee did the same thing they've done to just about every team this season except for Pittsburgh. They ran tempo, had busted coverage in the secondary, took advantage of it.
Yeah.
And Jalen Hyatt, 5 catches for 2 touchdowns. So he has really come on the scene as a deep threat for Tennessee. It's a lot of the same things. They get him out there, 2 receiver stack. He releases, and oftentimes the secondary just doesn't have enough time to communicate, and he gets a free touchdown.
Yeah.
Ole Miss beat Texas A&M 31-28. We love to see that. Any more losses for Jimbo Fisher are welcomed here on this show. We would love to see Jimbo continue to lose after what he did this offseason. Lane Kiffin, they're 8-1 right now, and they get a bye week this week to prepare for the Alabama game. Alabama will go to Oxford to play Ole Miss. Mm-hmm. I don't know if I love the matchup for Ole Miss. I just think that you have to be able to throw the ball with a ton of effectiveness like Tennessee did against Alabama. And Ole Miss likes to run the ball, and I think Alabama's built to run the ball. But Lane Kiffin last season won 10 games. That's something that no Ole Miss coach had ever done before. Historic. They are 8-1 now, and he very reasonably could win 2 more games and have back-to-back 10-win seasons. Again, that would be something historic for this Ole Miss Rebels program. I don't know what's going on at Texas A&M. Jimbo Fisher, I really don't know what he's doing, to be honest with you. He's got to bring in an offensive coordinator. They have to get things right. They have too much talent to be this bad.
Abysmal.
5 losses on the season. His buyout is $86 million.
They're not going to fire him because of that.
That's the only reason I believe he should be fired. But let's say, Ronnell, they have another 8-4 season next year. 9-3 at best next year. I mean, after this long, this is his 5th season. Could you see them eventually firing him after maybe a poor season next season?
I think next year is his and I don't even think it's going to be like he can't even really be at 8 wins or 9 wins, which isn't a bad season for a lot of programs. He needs to be at the 10-win range, I think, for them not to think about it at least. You know what I'm saying? I think he's just been too mediocre. And honestly, besides the COVID year, which was, I'm not going to say it didn't matter, but it was definitely a little more awkward than the other years. So it's almost like you can't really put that in with the rest of the time he's had. He hasn't looked good. Besides that win over Alabama, I mean, what has he done? What has he done? He hasn't done a lot except talk. You know, you have players in the locker room smoking like before games. Like I don't understand. I know he reprimanded them, but that just comes down to culture. That shouldn't even be happening in the first place.
Yeah, I think one of the issues is you're paying all of these players so much money, and he's paying these players to come to this university. And I think what they did, and they took a bad approach. They went and they said, all right, we're going to get the 5 stars. They didn't really look into who are these 5 stars. Alabama brought in Ajay Hall, 5-star wide receiver, immensely talented. We saw that in the A-Day game. Had some off-field issues, some character issues. He leaves the program, right? He goes to Texas and is not really making an impact at Texas either. I think what happened is Jimbo just said, let's get all the highly rated dudes. And they didn't evaluate the character of some of these guys. And those guys are gone. They're not going to Texas A&M because they love the program. They're going to Texas A&M because someone's paying them. When you look at their schedule this season, opened up with the win against Sam Houston, then they lost to App State. They won against Miami. Miami sucks right now. They're terrible. They won against Arkansas 23-21 in a game that they should have lost. And they've gone and they lost to Mississippi State, lost to Alabama, lost to South Carolina, lost to Ole Miss. Might beat Florida, probably beat Auburn, definitely beat UMass, and more than likely takes a loss to LSU. So he is fighting right now for bowl eligibility. If he beats Florida, Auburn, and UMass, they could go to a bowl game. If he doesn't, they are not going to a bowl game. That's pretty scary if you are a Texas A&M fan. You should be worried about the way that Jimbo Fisher is running his program. All right, so Michigan beat Michigan State, and they beat them soundly. But that's not really the big story of the game. We all kind of felt like that was going to happen. Michigan's a great team right now. Michigan State's in quite a slump. After the game, though, Michigan Stadium, they share a tunnel, right? So the players for both Michigan and Michigan State exit the field at the same time and go up the same tunnel to their locker rooms. And the videos surfaced yesterday and really late Saturday of a singular Michigan player getting ganged up on by multiple 5, 6, 7, 8 Michigan State players who are assaulting him. I mean, physically assaulting him. Mm-hmm. Hitting with helmets, punching, kicking, throwing him against the door. One Michigan player. I don't know how he got over there. I don't know what he said. I don't know if he initiated contact. But what we saw was 7-on-1, 8-on-1, 9-on-1 assault. So, Michigan State and Mel Tucker have released a statement reprimanding those players. There have been 4 players from Michigan State suspended from the program, and it looks like there will be legal action and an investigation taken. I think Michigan needs to consider maybe putting up some barriers in the middle of that tunnel to separate those teams.
That happens way too much over there.
When you look at the history of this stadium, there have been some jawing, there's been some contact with teams, but I don't think there's ever been an instance where there was just this much pure blatant assault on a player of either team from any team in the history of this stadium, which is a old stadium. So this is not good for Michigan State. This is not a culture problem, I don't think. Mel Tucker comes from Nick Saban and Kirby Smart. I have a lot of respect for him. A lot of these Michigan State players are probably upset right now because the actions of a few are going to reflect negatively on all 52. And there was 7 or 8 of them that did this. But it's not a good look right now for Michigan State. All right, so now to the big news. Auburn has fired Brian Harsin after less than 2 seasons. Brian Harsin he was just a bad fit. He comes to the University of Auburn with absolutely no experience in the South. And what does he do? Well, he has a losing record and does not recruit players at all. So Auburn is going to begin a national investigation, a national head coaching search. And I think they're going to look at Lane Kiffin first. At least that's the guy that I think they should look at first. Like we said, Lane Kiffin, 10 wins at Ole Miss last season, something he's never done before. Potentially 10 wins this season, which would be 2 back-to-back 10-win seasons. That's never happened in the history of Ole Miss. He's got history at the University of Alabama, at Ole Miss, so he knows the South well. Alabama has more in-state talent than Ole Miss. And something else that I think could be an attractive factor to Auburn for Lane Kiffin. This past week, before the A&M game, he said that they lost DJ Durkin, who was their defensive coordinator, who is now the new Texas A&M defensive coordinator, because A&M was able to pay DJ more money than Ole Miss could. And they wanted to keep him, but they just couldn't pay him. They wanted to get some of these players, but a lot of these bigger schools have more money, and Ole Miss just cannot provide the kind of financial support that Lane Kiffin feels like he needs if he wants to be an SEC champion. Auburn's got that financial support, right? Tim Cook, who is the CEO of Apple, is an Auburn booster. He went to Auburn. The richest man in Alabama, not Nick Saban, but the founder of Yellowwood Lumber, he is also an Auburn booster. And those are just 2 of the boosters at Auburn. Auburn has plenty of money. Auburn is a more relevant program than Ole Miss. Maybe not right now, but in terms of brand, I mean, within the past 2 decades, right? Within the past, in the 2000s, they've won a national championship with Cam Newton, and they got really close to winning another one, and they just barely missed out when Jimbo Fisher was at Florida State and won that national championship. So Auburn's been relevant, and they are a big national brand. So I think that Lane Kiffin could potentially be in play here. I don't know. He may decide to hold out and wait to see if he could get the Alabama gig after Nick Saban retires. But that's going to be a ways down the road. If I were Auburn, I'd start with Lane Kiffin. But another name I've seen thrown out there is Deion Sanders. So, Ronnell, I want to get your opinion on this. Deion Sanders, Lane Kiffin, another guy, Hugh Freeze, who was the head coach at Liberty and was at Ole Miss. I mean, are these realistic expectations for the Auburn head coach, or are they kind of wishful thinking?
I think we have to wait and see, just because we're still in season. There's a lot of guys that, there's not going to be much on like the Deion Sanders or the Lane Kiffin wave as of now. I don't know if Lane should leave. I agree with all your points that Lane should leave regarding that, but regardless, he's going to have to get through and go through Alabama. So if he's going to leave his coaching gig, where as it stands, he might as well just leave the conference to avoid Alabama in general, because he's going to still have to play us, still going to have to play the A&Ms. Not that A&M is good at right now, but there's still teams that are good. Like, it's going to always be stout competition. Deion Sanders, I don't think he's going to leave because he's so worried about and focusing on building up his group of guys and building up. He's like with the HBCUs, he wants to build that brand up. He's in a good spot. There's not too much pressure on him as of now. He kind of has a lot of leverage. He can do this for 5 more years, be successful, and then get a really good job down the line. I don't know if Deion should just push at this immediately. Hugh Freeze, I thought I saw he signed a big deal with Liberty. I'm not too sure.
Hugh Freeze signed an 8-year contract. I think it's about like a $58 million contract.
Yeah.
Let's just say Auburn can more than match what Liberty can match.
They can.
If they felt like they wanted Hugh Freeze.
Hugh Freeze might not be a bad option. Munkin might not be a bad option. There's some guys that Auburn could go after. I don't know. I feel like it's it's just a disaster right now. They need to just get this season over with, see where the chips land, and then honestly throw your money at the highest bidder. Throw your money at the best guy you can possibly get, and hopefully you can change the culture. Not a bad program. They're always relevant. They're always in the mix. I just feel like Harsin wasn't a best fit, and them giving up on Harsin so soon is not a good look. They lost their AD. It's a lot of moving pieces over in Auburn. So,
yeah, Auburn's been a dumpster fire as of late. I felt like the Harsin hire was not a good decision. They need to get somebody that you recognize.
Yeah.
When I pulled up the article and I said, "Hey, Dad, Auburn hired Brian Harsin," he said, "Who the heck is that?"
Yeah.
Get somebody whose name is recognizable. These young guys need to say, "Oh my gosh, I know who that guy is. I know who Deion Sanders is. I know who Lane Kiffin is. Mm-hmm. I know who Todd Monken is, OC at Georgia." You know these guys. Hugh Freeze has done nothing but win at Liberty pretty much. I mean, they're 7-1 right now. He's got 3 straight bowl wins. And he's beaten Nick Saban twice whenever he was at Ole Miss, which is something not many coaches can say. All right, really quickly here, rundown of the AP poll. Not that it matters much. Georgia at number 1, Tennessee at number 2, well, tied with Ohio State at number 2. Both of them receiving 1,500 points. Michigan at number 4, Clemson at number 5, Alabama at number 6, TCU 7, Oregon 8, USC up to 9, UCLA up to 10. Ole Miss jumping 4 spots to 11, Utah 12, Kansas State up 9 to 13, Illinois 14. Looks like they might be the ones who win that Big Ten Western Division, so they could potentially make it to the Big Ten Championship game. LSU at 15, Penn State 16, 17 is North Carolina, 18 Oklahoma State, Tulane at number 19, Wake Forest falling 10 spots to 20 after their loss to Louisville. North Carolina State up to 21, Syracuse down to 22, Liberty, the aforementioned Liberty, at 23, 24, Oregon State, and 25, the UCF Knights, after they beat top 20 Cincinnati. Gus Malzahn, former Auburn coach, is in the top 25, and Auburn is not. All right, thank you so much for tuning in to the student section. We hope that you have a fun and safe Halloween. Be sure to check out our podcast at WVUA90.7.com. I've been Aidan Magouyrk, joined by Ronnell Foreman. We will see you next week.
WVUA FM, Tuscaloosa.